Hello everybody. Here we are back with another Chits and Cats Soundbites. Today I'm going to talk about the last of the Black Riders, or associated with the Black Riders standalone expansions, which is The Fog on the Barrow-Downs. This part is also not part of the film, but it is definitely an important part of the books. And in my opinion, it contains some of arguably Tolkien's most beautiful writing. The story is such that after they've been rescued by Tom Bombadil from Old Man Willow, the hobbits spend a couple of, I think, 2 days and 2 nights with him, or 2 nights and one full day. And then on the second day, the morning of the second day after their arrival, they set out to Bree. And they get directions from Tom Bombadil, and they make their way across the Barrow-Downs, but they're supposed to follow a certain route, and they're supposed to, pass the Barrow-Downs while they are during the day. However, hobbits being hobbits, at some point they get hungry. They sit down in the heat, have some food, fall asleep, and by the time they wake up, the weather has changed. It's the sun has essentially, I don't know if it's completely set yet. If it's completely set yet, but it's definitely not as sunny as it was. The weather has changed, and also they realize that now they have lost quite a lot of time because they have slept longer than they thought they had. Now, for them, this means that they have to really get going and get a move on. And as they keep traveling, a fog descends on them. And this is a very, very thick fog. And at some point, suddenly, Frodo realizes that he is on his own. He has lost his companions, and he travels through a gap in the fog, which turns out to be a gap between two standing stones, which indicates to him that he has managed to not bypass the Barrow-Downs as they had planned, but he's actually moved straight into the Barrow-Downs, which they shouldn't have, because the Barrows are very dangerous. There are wights there, and this is where we are at the moment. This particular expansion has, on the one hand, several locations, but also a lot of enemies. They are wights. I didn't find them terrifyingly problematic, but I think if I had played with a group of hobbits only, it would have played out quite differently. So let's take a little look at the the cards. So we have, and I'm sorry, my cat's really annoying at the moment. I don't know what's wrong with him. He probably just wants ear scratches. We have the standing stones here, which is a unique location. Which again, I mean, I think all of the unique locations are essentially immune to player card effects. What they will do is they might affect your wights. They might affect how wights interact with you. But like I said, the wights themselves aren't necessarily that big a deal. We also have the hollow circle, which is directly taken from the book itself as well. You have the standing stones on the left, which is essentially the gap that the hobbit rides through, and then you have the hollow circle, which is also very interesting and very lovely, and a very lovely description in the book. There is a circle of stones, and in the middle is one single standing stone, and it points towards the sky like a finger, and it seems to be the middle pole of a tent, and around it is fog, but not in that particular circle. So it's a really interesting description of the fog. And those of you who have if you've ever been to Dartmoor, and if you've ever seen the fog descend on Dartmoor, You will probably be able to relate to this particular episode because I remember the first time I was in Britain, I was in Cornwall, and Dartmoor is close to Cornwall. And so we spent a day there, and we were traveling by car. We weren't traveling on horseback. And suddenly there was fog. The fog descended really rapidly. It wasn't dangerous, but it was something else. And I remember we were driving, and Dartmoor is very, very hilly. I don't want to call it mountainous, but it's very, very hilly. And we were driving through the fog, and then the road basically, we were approaching a hill, and the road was climbing the hill, and we were following the road, and it was actually quite a tall hill. And suddenly, I saw something that I'd never seen before. We were on top of the hill, and the fog wasn't around us anymore. It was actually below us. So we stopped, which was probably a dangerous thing to do because we basically pulled over because we really wanted to see this. So I got out of the car, and it was really strange because we were on top of this hill, and when you looked down the hill on all four sides, you could see a sea of fog, and the hill was like an island in it. And although the description is completely different in The Lord of the Rings, where you basically have this dome-like fog that sits on top of this hollow circle, it's kind of the same thing in reverse, and it reminded me of this part of The Lord of the Rings because it's this idea of you are completely surrounded by fog. Um, and when we then continued our journey and drove down again, we really dipped into the fog, and the fog was around us again. It was quite incredible. It was really something else. So essentially, what you do is you travel through this scenario, and it's all about questing because you want to complete the quest so that you can get to the climax of the story. And the climax of the story is when Frodo ends up inside the Barrow. Now, what happens is that the hobbits are essentially, um, if you like, abducted by one of the Barrow Wights. And Frodo wakes up and he sees his three friends um, lying inside the barrow. He's also inside the barrow, and they have been, I don't know, basically covered, I guess, in shrouds. And there is a huge long sword that's laid across their necks. And he realizes that probably they're going to be sacrificed, and he's thinking, like, I could escape, I could leave the barrow, I could run outside, and of course I would sacrifice my friends, but I'm pretty sure nobody would blame me, not even Gandalf would blame me. I mean, I'm carrying the ring. I need to survive. I need to take the ring to Rivendell. So um, let's just you know get out of here and save myself. And that's actually a very pivotal moment, and unfortunately it's completely lost to people who've never read the books, because this inner conflict that Frodo has um, is very understandable, and I don't know if I would have actually done what he did, because he decides to stay. And then he sees a hand crawling um, towards a hand and an arm, it's not a disembodied hand, crawling towards the hilt of the sword that's lying across his comrades' necks. And he wakes out of this stupor that has taken hold of him and takes one of the knives that are lying around. I mean, this is a barrow, so there are burial goods in there that have been placed there to honor the dead, and he just hacks away at this hand at the wrist and severs it. Um, and then I think there's a piercing cry, and he basically realizes he needs to do something. And then we come back to the power of song, and poetry in Middle-earth, he remembers the song that Tom Bombadil taught them, and he starts singing. And Tom actually does arrive, and you again have this Tom Bombadil card in this particular set where he pops up when you least expect him to and helps you out. If you manage to get past this stage, and at this stage, basically, if you have a multiplayer game, everyone has their own 4B stage and has to have their own staging area, and you essentially do not travel anymore because you can't, because you're stuck in the barrow. So when you start discarding cards, when you start the encounter phase, you draw an encounter card, and if it's not an enemy, you discard it, but you add its threat value to your threat. So that's your threat will increase quite quickly. But if you manage to get through this, you return to the Great Barrow, and you are then allowed to place a what you call it, you place a progress on it. So it's quite important that you first finish stage 3B, because if you've managed to get through stage 3B, you can then solve the quest right there. If you haven't, then you have to keep questing for stage 3B. And if another Great Barrow comes out of the encounter deck, you're caught in the barrow, you're trapped inside the barrow again. So it would repeat itself, and that can be quite tedious. So again, here the strategy is put as much progress as you can on stage 3B, and then travel by searching for the Great Barrow. Or if a Great Barrow just pops up as you're going through this stage 3B, then follow 4B and just pray that it doesn't come up again. The whites themselves have a couple of nasty side effects while they're engaged with you. One prevents you from gaining cards through card effects. So if somebody were to play something like a Campfire Tale, where everybody draws a card, if you have a white engaged with you that prevents you from gaining cards through card effects, you cannot get one. There's one that will keep you from gaining resources from card effects, so Steward of Gondor or Resourceful would not work. So these are all quite important changes, and that can really, depending on your deck, or for example, Ancient Matham wouldn't work. Ancient Matham would trigger, but if you are the first player and you have one of those whites engaged with you that prevent you from gaining cards through card effects, it would just evaporate. Nothing would happen. So you would have lost the Ancient Matham, and so depending on how your deck operates, these can be quite crippling. However, I was able to slaughter them within one round, so I wasn't terribly affected by them. But if you have a different set of heroes or a different deck where you cannot just get rid of those whites pretty quickly and pretty neatly, they can be quite devastating. Now, how do I like this quest? I think it's lovely because it plays really quickly. I mean, the ancient forest, the old forest can be quite a slog. This one is, you know, fairly, at least it feels quicker. I don't know if it really plays more quickly, but it does feel like time passes more quickly. I really enjoy it. Probably also because it's my most favorite part of this, is without a doubt the most favorite part of the whole trilogy in my eyes. I love this particular chapter, and it's the best in my opinion. So even just getting to play it in some shape or form makes me happy. That's very simple. I like the artwork. The whites are really terrifying. I like the Great Barrow artwork. The Trapped Inside the Barrow, I think, really captures the description from the book. So all in all, I would say it's one that I would really recommend. I'm very happy that they included it because for personal reasons, obviously. And I think it's also nice that they have given you a boon that you can take with you. And the boon that you get is Ho Tom Bombadil. It's the song which allows you to completely negate a when revealed effect. So it works like a test of will. But when you use it, you have to remove it from the campaign pool. So it's a once-off thing. But as you saw, probably if you've watched my Fly to the Fort video, I had to use it because otherwise I would not have won that scenario. And I've used it every single time I played a Fly to the Fort, because a Fly to the Fort is quite a challenging scenario. You're on a timer, literally. So I really like it, and I think it's really well made, and I'm very happy that Fantasy Flight Games included it. So if you're wondering which standalones to get, I would choose this one over the Old Forest. If you're only going to get one, get this one. Okay, talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.